Have you ever stopped to wonder if the world around you is actually real? What if I told you that everything you see, touch, and hear, the entire universe, isn't made of physical matter, but of mind? Welcome to the world of idealism, a mind-bending philosophical theory that challenges everything we think we know about reality. Idealism claims that reality is fundamentally mental, that the physical world, as solid and objective as it seems, is actually the product of consciousness, not the other way around. This idea isn't new. In fact, it stretches back centuries. One of its most famous proponents, George Berkeley, boldly claimed, "Esse est percipi," to be is to be perceived. For Berkeley, the chair you're sitting on, the trees outside your window, the moon in the sky, they don't exist independently of perception. They exist because they are perceived by a mind. If no mind perceives them, they simply vanish. Wild, right? But Berkeley took it one step further. If everything must be perceived to exist, then what holds the universe together when we aren't looking? His answer: God, the ultimate perceiver. A divine consciousness that sustains the world through constant observation. This might sound strange to modern ears, but here's the twist. Quantum physics may actually support some of these ideas. The famous double-slit experiment, where particles behave differently depending on whether they're being observed, seems to echo Berkeley's idealism. As physicist John Wheeler once said, "No phenomenon is a real phenomenon until it is an observed phenomenon." In other words, observation creates reality, and this is where idealism returns with force. Could it be that the universe doesn't create consciousness, but that consciousness creates the universe? Even Immanuel Kant, though not a pure idealist like Berkeley, suggested that what we perceive as the external world is shaped entirely by our minds. We don't know the thing in itself, the world as it truly is. We only know our mental representation of it. So when you touch a cold glass of water or hear music playing, what's really happening? Idealism would say, those sensations are not coming from the objects themselves. They're generated by your consciousness. If that's true, then we live not in a universe of objects, but in a universe of experiences. Fast forward to today, and idealism is no longer just a dusty theory from the 18th century. In fact, it's enjoying a serious revival, not just in philosophy, but in neuroscience, consciousness studies, and even theoretical physics. One of the most vocal defenders of modern idealism is philosopher Bernardo Kastrup, who argues that consciousness is not a product of the brain, but the very foundation of reality. According to him, what we call the physical world is simply a shared mental narrative, emerging from a deeper, unified field of consciousness. In his words, brains do not produce consciousness. Rather, consciousness localizes itself as individual brains. Mind blown. And here's where things get even weirder. Many leading physicists, including Max Planck, the founder of quantum theory, have expressed eerily idealist views. Planck once said, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness." Let that sink in. The father of quantum physics believed consciousness comes first, and matter comes second. This flips the materialist worldview on its head. For centuries, science has operated under the assumption that matter is primary, and consciousness somehow emerges from it. But idealism suggests the opposite, that everything material, your body, your laptop, the stars, are phenomena within mind, not outside it. If that's true, then we have to ask, whose mind? Some idealists suggest we are all modulations of a universal consciousness, drops in a cosmic ocean of mind. Just like waves on the surface of water, each of us is distinct for a moment, but made of the same stuff. This view, sometimes called absolute idealism, was championed by thinkers like Hegel and Schopenhauer, who believed that ultimate reality is a single, infinite consciousness expressing itself in various forms. And guess what? This isn't just abstract poetry. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, like the participatory universe and the observer effect, hint that reality doesn't take form until it's observed, until it's thought. So here's the big question. If everything we know is a product of mind, can we ever be certain there's a world out there at all? If idealism holds true, then the so-called objective world, the world that science claims to study independently of human experience, may not be objective at all. Instead, it might be a persistent illusion, an internal consistency within consciousness that feels like a stable external reality. The 20th century philosopher Alfred North Whitehead called materialism an abstraction, arguing that science has essentially forgotten that its own data are derived from human perception. He wrote, "Nature is a construction of the mind." In other words, what we call reality might just be an organized hallucination, not in a delusional sense, but in the sense that it's always filtered, interpreted, and shaped by consciousness. Even Einstein, often cast as the ultimate realist, once admitted, reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And if we go deeper into neuroscience, we find that even our brains don't directly access reality. The colors we see, the sounds we hear, the textures we feel, these are not direct representations of the external world. They are interpretations, created by the brain based on electrical signals. But here's the twist. If all experience is mediated by consciousness, and if we only ever have access to our experiences, how could we prove a material world even exists beyond them? This brings us into dangerous and fascinating philosophical waters. Could the external world be a projection of the mind? Or worse, could only your own mind exist? That leads us straight into the shadowy territory of solipsism. But before we go that far, let's be clear. Idealism is not saying nothing exists. It's saying everything that exists in consciousness. That's a subtle but profound difference. So when you close your eyes and imagine a tree, and then open your eyes and see a tree, idealism asks, what's the real difference? If both are mental events, just different flavors of experience, then the so-called external tree is no more real than the one in your imagination. That doesn't mean the world is arbitrary or meaningless. On the contrary, it suggests that reality is a kind of shared dream, consistent, lawful, and incredibly deep, but still grounded in mind, not matter. For centuries, materialism has dominated the scientific worldview. It claims that matter is primary, and consciousness is merely a byproduct, a quirky side effect of neurons firing in the brain. This is the view you were probably taught in school. Atoms make molecules, molecules make cells, cells make brains, and somehow, poof, consciousness appears. But there's a glaring problem. No one knows how consciousness arises from matter. This mystery is so persistent and unsolved that it's been dubbed the hard problem of consciousness, a term coined by philosopher David Chalmers. He asked, how does subjective experience emerge from physical processes? And the truth is, no one can answer it. Idealism, on the other hand, doesn't struggle with this problem because it reverses the equation. It says, consciousness doesn't come from matter. Matter comes from consciousness. This idea doesn't just sidestep the hard problem, it solves it. If the universe is made of mind, then your experience is not an illusion to be explained away. It is the very foundation of reality. But here's where idealism gets radical. If all things exist in consciousness, then even space and time are not fundamental. They are modes of experience like color or sound. Einstein himself hinted at this when he said, space and time are modes by which we think, not conditions in which we live. Think about that. If space and time are mental constructs, then the Big Bang, the stars, your childhood, the future, all of it, may exist within a deeper, timeless mind. That mind might be universal, or it might be yours. Either way, reality as we know it collapses into experience. Idealism doesn't deny the world. It simply redefines what the world is. It says the cosmos is not a dead machine, but a living experience, unfolding moment by moment in the field of consciousness. So now we must ask, if reality is mind-made, what does that say about you? Are you just another ripple in the field of consciousness? Or could your mind be the very canvas on which the universe is painted? Let's take a breath, because now we're diving into the deepest waters of idealism. If consciousness is not a side effect, not a byproduct, not an illusion, but the fundamental substance of reality, then we're forced to rethink everything, from physics to free will. In this view, consciousness is not in the brain. Instead, the brain is in consciousness. Just like dreams occur within your mind while you sleep, this waking world may also be unfolding within a larger field of awareness. This is where idealism overlaps with Eastern philosophies, especially Vedanta, and certain interpretations of Buddhism. These traditions have long claimed that consciousness is the true self, not the body, not the thoughts, but the witnessing awareness behind it all. The Indian sage Sri Ramana Maharshi once said, "The world is nothing more than an appearance in consciousness." And in Vedantic philosophy, Brahman, the ultimate reality, is pure, infinite consciousness. Everything else is Maya, illusion, or rather appearance within that consciousness. Modern idealist thinkers build on this idea, suggesting that your personal identity, the sense of I am, is a localized expression of the universal mind. Bernardo Kastrup calls these individual minds alters, like whirlpools in a vast ocean. Each one appears separate, but they're made of the same water. This view doesn't just satisfy spiritual intuition. It aligns with cutting-edge theories in consciousness science, such as integrated information theory, which suggests that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of reality, like space or time. So when you look at the stars, or at a stranger's face, or into your own mind, idealism invites you to consider. You're not looking out into a world. You're looking into the very fabric of consciousness, the thing you are made of. If consciousness is fundamental, then what happens when the body dies? Materialism would say, that's it. Lights out. Game over. Consciousness dies with the brain. But under idealism, death is not the end of consciousness, because consciousness was never inside the brain to begin with. The brain is just a localization tool, like a radio that picks up and filters a signal. When the radio breaks, the signal doesn't disappear, it simply stops being received. This idea isn't just poetic, it's echoed in near-death experience research, where people often report vivid, coherent experiences while their brains are clinically offline. How do you explain a conscious experience without a functioning brain, unless mind doesn't depend on matter? Dreams offer another curious hint. In dreams, your mind creates entire worlds, people, and dramas, often so immersive that you believe they're real, until you wake up. Idealism suggests that waking life might not be so different. What if you never really woke up? What if you're still within a dream, a coherent, shared dream, generated by a deeper field of consciousness? Even paranormal phenomena like telepathy, synchronicity, or out-of-body experiences, though controversial, are easier to accommodate under idealism. If all minds exist within a universal mind, then perhaps under certain conditions, these minds can connect, resonate, or overlap. As philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "The world is my representation." So, if idealism is right, the deepest truths about reality may not be out there in a galaxy or a microscope, but within your own awareness. So here we are, at the edge of a radical idea. What if everything you've been taught about the world is backwards? What if reality is not made of atoms, but of awareness? What if your mind is not inside the universe, but the universe is inside your mind? Idealism is no longer just a dusty old theory tucked away in philosophy books. It's making a comeback, and fast. As science continues to hit a wall in explaining consciousness, many thinkers are daring to ask the unthinkable. Maybe the reason we can't find consciousness in matter is because we've been looking in the wrong direction. This isn't just speculative woo-woo. Even respected physicists like Max Planck, the father of quantum theory, once said, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness." The idea echoes across time, all the way back to ancient Greece. Plato, for instance, believed that the material world was a mere shadow of a deeper, invisible realm of forms, eternal, perfect ideas that give shape to what we see. In that sense, He saw the world of thought as more real than the world of things. And Plotinus, a later Neoplatonist philosopher, proposed that all of reality flows from a single, ineffable source, the One, a kind of universal mind beyond space and time. This mirrors the core claim of idealism, that all things emerge from one undivided consciousness. So, from Plato to Planck, from Vedanta to virtual reality, one message echoes louder than ever. You are not in the universe is in you. Now, this isn't just food for thought, it's a revolution of perception. If the world is mind-made, then your beliefs, your attention, your conscious awareness shape reality more directly than you ever imagined. Idealism isn't just a theory, it's a lens, a way of seeing the world that restores mystery, depth, and meaning in an age of cold reductionism. It reminds us that what you are is not a pile of atoms bumping into each other, but the very canvas upon which the stars, dreams, and questions arise. If this video expanded your perception or made you question what reality really is, hit that like button. It helps this video reach more curious minds like yours. What do you think? Do you believe that consciousness is the foundation of everything? Or are you still leaning toward the materialist view? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one and I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you're fascinated by mind-bending ideas like idealism, solipsism, panpsychism, and the deep questions of existence and consciousness, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. This channel is your home for modern philosophy, ancient wisdom, and the mysteries of the mind. Remember, reality might not be what you think it is. It might be what you are. Thanks for watching, and stay conscious.